Lee Hyun stepped off the transport ship and immediately felt his lungs burn. Even with the advanced breathing mask, the thick methane atmosphere of Kithara made every breath feel heavy and strange. This was it. Humanity's first real chance to make friends with an alien empire that controlled half the galaxy. "Remember, don't make any sudden movements," whispered Dr. Kim Ji-won, the team's alien expert, as they walked through the crystal corridors of the Thalorian palace. "These insects are very sensitive to body language." Hyun nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. At 32, he was the youngest ambassador Earth had ever sent on a mission this important. The weight of representing all of humanity sat heavy on his shoulders like a thick blanket. The throne room took his breath away. Massive crystal pillars reached up toward a ceiling that seemed to disappear into purple mist. Strange glowing plants lined the walls, pulsing with soft light that made everything look like a dream. And there, at the center of it all, sat Queen Velnara. She was nothing like the monsters from old Earth movies. Yes, she had 6 arms and compound eyes that sparkled like diamonds, but there was something graceful about her. Her movements were smooth and careful, like a dancer. Her exoskeleton shimmered with colors that changed as she moved, deep blues and purples that reminded Hyun of the ocean at sunset. "Welcome, small human," her voice came through the translation device, sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We have waited long to meet your kind." The ceremony began with ancient Thalorian rituals that Hyun had studied for months. He watched as dozens of insect courtiers performed elaborate dances, their wings creating music that his human ears could barely understand. The Queen's eyes never left him, and he found himself fascinated by how they changed color. From deep purple to bright gold to soft green, everything was going perfectly. Too perfectly. That's when the nerves hit him like a truck. His nose started to itch, probably from the strange atmosphere or maybe just from pure anxiety. Without thinking, he reached up and scratched it. Just a quick little movement that any human would do 100 times a day without thinking. The entire room went silent. Every single Thalorian froze like statues. The Queen's eyes suddenly blazed bright red, then shifted to a color Heian had never seen before, something between silver and gold that seemed to pulse with its own light. A low humming sound filled the air, coming from all the insects at once. "Oh." "No," Dr. Kim whispered beside him, so quietly only Hyun could hear. "Oh no, oh no, oh no, what?" Hyun whispered back, still not understanding why everyone was staring at him like he'd just grown a second head. The Queen stood up slowly, her 6 arms moving in a pattern that looked almost like she was dancing. But there was something different about her now. Her movements seemed more fluid, more graceful, and that strange light in her eyes was getting brighter. "Ambassador Lee Hyun of Earth," she said, and her voice had changed too. It was deeper now, richer, like honey mixed with thunder. "You have performed the Velthanor, the sacred bonding gesture of our people." Hyun's blood turned to ice. "The what?" "By touching your face in the presence of our queen during the ceremony of first meeting," Dr. Kim explained in a shaky voice. You have just asked her to marry you." The emergency meeting room buzzed with panic. Hyun sat at the metal table, his head in his hands, while Dr. Park Soo paced back and forth like a caged animal. The xenobiologist's usually calm face was pale, with worry as she flipped through her tablet, searching for any possible solution. "Tell me there's a way out of this," Hyun pleaded, looking up at her with desperate eyes. "Tell me this is all just a big misunderstanding." Park Soo stopped pacing and sat down across from him. Her expression was grim. "I wish I could, Hyun, but I've been studying Thalorian biology for 15 years and this is bad. Really bad." She pulled up a holographic display showing the Queen's body structure. "When you made that gesture, you triggered something in her. Brain chemistry. Her body is now producing a hormone called velthanium. Think of it like a countdown timer that can't be stopped." "What kind of countdown?" Hyun's voice cracked. 10 days, Park Soo said quietly. "If the bonding ritual isn't completed within 10 days, the hormone becomes toxic. Her organs will start shutting down one by one. She'll die, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it." Hyun felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "So if I don't marry her, she dies?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." The door burst open and Admiral Choi Minho stormed in. his face red with anger. Behind him came 3 more Earth officials, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. "This is a disaster," the Admiral shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Ambassador? The entire Thylorian fleet is surrounding our ships right now. They're demanding we honor their sacred law, or they'll consider it an act of war." "I didn't know," Hyun shot back, standing up. "How was I supposed to know that scratching my nose would cause an intergalactic incident?" "The Thylorian Council has given us 6 hours to decide," said Dr. Yang Hana, the mission's political advisor. She looked exhausted. 6 hours to either. Agree to the marriage or face the consequences. "What consequences?" Hyun asked, though he was pretty sure he didn't want to know. "War," Admiral Choi said simply. "They consider breaking a bonding ritual to be the ultimate insult. If their queen dies because of a human's actions, they'll destroy every human colony in this sector." Hyun collapsed back into his chair. In the span of 1 day, he'd gone from being humanity's hope for peace to potentially starting the biggest war in galactic history. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on him. "There has to be another way," he whispered. That's when the door chimed softly and Queen Velnara herself entered the room. Without her royal robes, she looked smaller, more vulnerable. Her crystalline eyes had dulled to a soft blue, and Hyun could see something in them he hadn't expected. Sadness. "May I speak with Ambassador Lee alone?" she asked, her translated voice gentle. The Earth officials reluctantly left, though Admiral Choi shot Hyun a warning look before closing the door. Velnara sat down across from him, her 6 arms folded carefully. "I know you didn't mean to bond with me," she said. "I can see the fear in your eyes, the way you look at me like I'm some kind of monster." "You're not a monster," Hyun said quickly. I'm scared. I never wanted any of this." "Neither." "Did I?" she replied, and her honesty surprised him. "I never chose to be queen. My people selected me when I was just a child, because I had the rare ability to communicate with other species. I've spent my entire life following laws I never had a voice in making." She looked down at her hands. "If you refuse the bonding, I will die. But I want you to know I don't blame you. Sometimes I think death might be easier than living as a prisoner of tradition." The royal chambers felt like a beautiful prison. Hyun sat on the edge of what he assumed was a bed, though it looked more like a giant crystalline flower that glowed softly in the dim light. Across the room, Queen Velnara perched on a structure that resembled a tree made of silver, her 6 arms moving in slow, graceful patterns. 3 days had passed since the bonding incident, and they'd barely spoken beyond polite greetings. The translation device sat between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. "Are you afraid of me?" Velnara finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched for hours. Hyun looked up, startled. "Honestly? A little. Not because you're dangerous, but because I don't understand you. Where I come from, we're taught that fear usually comes from not knowing something." She tilted her head, and he noticed her eyes shift to a curious shade of green. "That's interesting. My people are taught that fear comes from chaos, from things that don't follow the proper order." "Your proper order is killing you," Hyun said gently, then immediately worried he'd been too blunt, but Velnara made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "You're right. My people have followed the same traditions for over 10,000 years. We do things exactly as our ancestors did them, never questioning why." She stood and walked to the large window that showed the swirling methane storms outside. "Do you know what happens to a species that never changes, Ambassador Lee? They die out. Slowly. Very slowly. We're not dying dramatically like in your human stories. We're just fading. Our birth rates are declining. Our innovation stopped centuries ago. We build the same ships, eat the same foods, think the same thoughts as our great-great-grandparents." Hyun joined her at the window. Up close, he could see that her exoskeleton wasn't perfectly smooth. It had tiny patterns etched into it, like art. "That sounds lonely." "It is. I've been queen for 23 years, and every day is exactly like the one before. Council meetings, where we discuss the same problems with the same solutions that don't work. Ceremonies that celebrate traditions no one remembers the meaning of." Her voice grew softer. I used to dream of seeing other worlds, meeting other species, learning new ways to live. But queens don't get to dream. Humans never stop dreaming, Hyun said. Sometimes I think it's our biggest weakness and our greatest strength at the same time. Tell me about your dreams. So he did. He told her about Earth's messy, chaotic history, how humans fought and argued and made terrible mistakes, but always kept trying new things. He talked about artists who painted pictures that made no sense, scientists who asked dangerous questions, and leaders who sometimes ignored tradition to do what felt right. We're not very organized, he admitted. We start wars over stupid things, we pollute our own planet, and we can't agree on anything. But we adapt. When something doesn't work, we try something else. Velnara's eyes shifted through several colors as she processed this. Your chaos sounds wonderful. Your order has its benefits too, Hyun said. Look at this place, it's beautiful. Your people have created art that lasts thousands of years. You have peace, stability, a system that works. A system that's slowly strangling us. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the storms outside. Finally, Velnara spoke again. What if we could combine them? Your chaos and our order. What do you mean? She turned to face him, and for the first time, her eyes held something he recognized. Hope. I mean, what if this bonding wasn't a disaster? What if it was exactly what both our peoples needed? Hyun felt a strange flutter in his chest. You think we could actually make this work, I think, she said slowly, that you might be the key to saving my people. And maybe I could help yours learn some patience and planning. So instead of being trapped together, we could choose to be partners. Exactly. Not because we have to, but because we want to. The next morning brought a whirlwind of activity that made Hyun's head spin. Thailorian servants bustled around the royal chambers, carrying strange glowing objects and organic-looking decorations that seemed to breathe on their own. The wedding preparations had officially begun, whether he felt ready or not. This is a biosynthesizer, Velnara explained, holding up what looked like a cross between a flower and a computer. It can create almost anything we need by rearranging molecules. Watch. She pressed her palm against the device and it began to glow. Within seconds, it had produced a perfect replica of Hyun's Earth uniform, but made from some kind of living fabric that shifted colors like her skin. That's incredible, Hyun breathed, touching the material. It felt warm, almost like it had a pulse. How does it work? We program it with our thoughts and body chemistry. It reads what we need and creates. She paused, looking uncertain. Would you like to try? Hyun placed his hand on the biosynthesizer, trying to think of something simple. To his amazement, it began to glow again, but this time it sparked and made a sound like a sneeze before producing something that looked like a lopsided metal cup. Interesting, Velnara said, studying the object. It's trying to interpret human thought patterns, but your minds work so differently from ours. Your thoughts jump around in ways our technology can't follow. That's what my teachers always said too, Hyun laughed. But look, it still made something, it's just not what either of us expected. Over the following days, they fell into a routine of teaching each other. Hyun showed Velnara human improvisation techniques, how to solve problems by trying random solutions until something worked. He taught her Earth games where the rules changed as you played, and watched her eyes light up with colors he'd never seen before. This is wonderful, she exclaimed after he taught her rock, paper, scissors. There's no ancient tradition telling us who should win. We just play. In return, she showed him Thailorian meditation techniques that helped him focus his scattered human thoughts. She taught him about their living architecture, where buildings grew instead of being built, and their music that could literally heal wounds. But not everyone was happy about their growing friendship. Lord Kexthar, the Queen's chief advisor, watched them with eyes that burned like red coals. He was older than Velnara, with battle scars across his exoskeleton, and a voice that sounded like grinding metal when he spoke. "This human is changing you, my queen," he said during one of their daily council meetings. "You speak differently. Move differently. You're becoming contaminated." "I'm becoming myself," Velnara replied calmly, but Hyun could see the tension in her posture. "You are becoming something that isn't Thylaurian." Kexthar's voice rose. "For 10,000 years our bloodlines have remained pure. Our ways have remained unchanged. Now this creature comes here, and suddenly you want to throw away everything. That makes us who we are?" "What makes us who we are is dying," Velnara said firmly. "Our birth rates, our creativity, our will to explore. It's all fading away because we're so afraid of change." More nobles began to murmur their agreement with Kexthar. Hyun could feel their hostility like a physical weight pressing down on him. Their eyes never shifted from the angry red color, and they made clicking sounds with their mandibles whenever he spoke. "The human has poisoned her mind," whispered Lady Velthara, another council member. "Soon she'll want to change our sacred laws, our ancient ceremonies. She'll want us to become like them, chaotic, unpredictable, weak." "We should call off this wedding," Kexthar declared. "Better to let the queen die with honor than watch her destroy our civilization." "You'd rather let me die than see me happy?" Velnara asked, her voice quiet but dangerous. The room fell silent. Hyun realized that for the first time in her life, their queen was fighting back against the system that had controlled her since birth, and she was doing it for him. That night, as they practiced their wedding ceremony, Hyun couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed darker, the whispers louder. Change was coming to the Thylaurian Empire, and not everyone wanted to survive it. The crystal garden hummed with soft music as dozens of Thylaurian nobles gathered for the pre-wedding ritual called the Blessing of Intentions. Hyun stood nervously, beside Velnara, wearing the living fabric suit that still felt strange against his skin. The ceremony was supposed to be peaceful, just sharing hopes and dreams for their future together. Everything felt wrong from the moment they arrived. The nobles' eyes burned with that angry red color, and their clicking sounds were sharper, more aggressive than usual. Hyun noticed that several of them had positioned themselves in a circle around the garden's center, blocking the exits. "Something's not right," he whispered to Velnara. She nodded slightly, her own eyes shifting to a cautious yellow. "I feel it too. Stay close to me." General Kexthar stepped forward to lead the ceremony, his scarred exoskeleton gleaming in the garden's light. But instead of the traditional blessing, he raised his arm and pointed directly at Hyun. "Brothers and sisters," he announced in a voice that made the air vibrate. "Today we save our queen from the human contamination that threatens to destroy our people." That's when Hyun saw the weapons. The nobles had been hiding bioweapons, living creatures, that looked like a cross between a snake and a laser gun. They raised them in perfect synchronization, all aimed at him. Hyun's heart hammered against his ribs as he realized he was about to die in an alien garden, surrounded by beings who saw him as a disease to be cured. "Velnara, get back!" he shouted, stepping in front of her. But something incredible happened. The moment Hyun moved to protect her, Velnara's entire body began to change. Her gentle blue coloring shifted to deep black with streaks of silver. Her 6 arms moved faster than human eyes could follow, and her graceful movements became deadly precise. "You will not touch him," she said, but her voice was completely different, deeper, more powerful, like the sound of an earthquake. The first attacker fired his bioweapon, sending a stream of acid toward Hyun. But Velnara was already moving, her body flowing like liquid mercury as she intercepted the attack. The acid hit her arm and simply bounced off. Her skin had become harder than steel. "Impossible," Kexthar gasped. "Queens aren't supposed to have combat biology." "This queen does," Velnara replied, and suddenly she was beside the first attacker. One swift movement from her arm and his weapon was destroyed. Another movement, and he was unconscious on the ground. More attackers fired at once, but Velnara moved like a dancer made of shadows and lightning. She was everywhere at once, deflecting attacks, disarming opponents, protecting Hyun without ever seriously hurting anyone. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he'd ever seen. "The bond has awakened her warrior genetics," someone screamed. "The human has made her into something unnatural." But Hyun saw the truth. This wasn't unnatural. This was who Velnara had always been underneath all those rules and traditions. The bonding hadn't changed her. It had set her free. Kexthar made one last desperate attempt, charging directly at Hyun with a crystalline blade. But Velnara was there first, catching the weapon with her bare hand and crushing it to powder. "You forget yourself, Kexthar," she said, her voice returning to normal as her combat biology began to fade. "I am your queen, and he is my chosen. Mate, touch him again, and I will show you what other abilities this bond has awakened." The garden fell silent except for the groaning of defeated attackers. Hyun stared at Velnara in amazement, finally understanding what the bioscanners had been trying to tell them. The bonding process hadn't just connected them emotionally, it had unlocked dormant genetic potential in both their species. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her eyes now a concerned purple as she checked him for injuries. "No, thanks to you," he breathed. "But Velnara, what you just did, how did you know you could do that?" "I didn't," she admitted. "When I saw them, trying to hurt you, something inside me just woke up, like a part of me that had been sleeping my whole life suddenly opened its eyes." Hyun reached out and took one of her hands, no longer afraid of her differences. "Maybe that's what the bond really does. Maybe it doesn't trap us, maybe it shows us who we really are." The remaining nobles watched in stunned silence as their queen and the human ambassador walked out of the garden together, hand in hand. Both of them forever changed by the moment they chose to protect each other. The great throne room had been transformed into something that looked like a dream and a nightmare mixed together. Massive crystal formations grew from the floor like frozen waterfalls, while earth flowers floated in the air using Thylorian anti-gravity technology. Armed guards stood at every entrance, some human, some Thylorian, all watching for any sign of trouble. Hyun stood at the altar, wearing a suit. That was part human tuxedo, part living Thylorian silk that shifted colors with his emotions. Right now it was showing streaks of nervous green and hopeful gold. His hands trembled slightly as he watched Velnara approach from the far end of the room. She looked incredible. Her ceremonial robes seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing around her 6 arms like water. But it was her eyes that took his breath away. They were cycling through every color he'd ever seen her display, like a rainbow of emotions she couldn't hide. Dr. Park Soo stood beside the altar with her bioscanner, monitoring the bonding process that had started the moment Hyun made that fateful gesture. The readings had been getting stronger every day, but today they were off the charts. "The biological changes are accelerating," she whispered to Admiral Choi, who stood nearby looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Whatever's happening between them, it's affecting both their species on a genetic level." The ceremony began, with traditional Thylorian chants that sounded like wind through crystal caves. Then came the human elements, words about love and partnership that Hyun's grandmother had taught him. As they spoke their vows, something extraordinary started happening. "I promise to honor your traditions while sharing my chaos," Hyun said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "I promise to give you my order while embracing your change," Velnara replied. The moment their words finished, every bioscanner in the room started beeping frantically. Velnara's eyes suddenly blazed, with a light so bright that several people had to shield their faces. But it wasn't just her. Other Thylorians in the crowd were beginning to glow too. "What's happening?" Hyun asked, reaching for her hand. "I don't know," she gasped. But her voice sounded different, richer, more complex. I can feel, all of them." Dr. Park Soo was frantically checking her readings. "The bonding hormone isn't just affecting the queen anymore. It's spreading through the entire Thylorian population like a wave. But that's impossible. The biology doesn't work that way." "Unless," said Dr. Kim Ji-won, the xenobiologist who'd been studying the phenomenon, "unless human DNA is acting as a catalyst, like adding a missing ingredient to a recipe that was never quite complete." Around the room, younger Thylorians were beginning to change. Their rigid postures became more fluid. Their eyes started cycling through new colors that had never been seen before. Most dramatically, they began moving in ways that weren't part of any traditional ceremony, creative, spontaneous movements that looked almost like dancing. "The old ways are ending," whispered an elderly Thylorian noble, and for the first time his voice didn't sound afraid. It sounded amazed, but the changes weren't one-sided. Hyun could feel something happening to him too. His scattered human thoughts were becoming more focused, more organized. He could sense patterns in the crowd's movement that he'd never noticed before. The chaos in his mind was finding structure without losing its creativity. "Do you feel that?" Velnara asked, her six, hands now holding both his hands, as the ceremony reached its climax. "Yeah," he breathed. "We're not just bonding with each other, we're bonding our entire species together." The final vows were spoken in a language that was part human, part Thylorian, and part something entirely new. As their lips met in the first kiss between their species, a pulse of energy swept through the room like a gentle earthquake. When it was over, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, the crowd began to applaud. Not the formal, measured clapping of Thylorian tradition, but the wild, enthusiastic cheering that humans use to celebrate joy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Choi announced, his voice shaking with emotion, "I present to you the first truly hybrid couple in galactic history, and I think they've just changed everything." The wedding day arrived with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Armed guards lined every hallway of the Crystal Palace, both human soldiers with their advanced weapons and Thylorian warriors whose exoskeletons had been enhanced for combat. After the assassination attempt, nobody was taking any chances. Hyun adjusted his collar for the 100th time as he stood in the preparation chamber. The ceremonial outfit was unlike anything he'd ever worn. Part earth formal wear, part living Thylorian fabric that responded to his heartbeat. Right now, it was pulsing with nervous energy, showing swirls of silver and blue across the chest. "UI. Ready for this?" asked Captain Yoon Daiho, his security chief and oldest friend from the diplomatic corps. "As ready as someone can be for making history," Hyun replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Think we'll survive the day? With all these guards? The real question is whether the galaxy will survive what you two are about to unleash." Meanwhile, 3 floors up, Velnara was experiencing her own pre-wedding jitters. Her 6 arms moved in nervous patterns as her attendants helped her into the ceremonial robes that had been worn by Thylorian queens for thousands of years. But today, they'd been modified with human elements, small earth flowers woven into the fabric, colors that had never been seen in traditional ceremonies. "My queen," said her oldest advisor, Lady Silvara, "are you certain about this path? Once the final bonding is complete, there will be no returning to the old ways." "The old ways were killing us slowly," Velnara replied, her eyes shifting to a determined gold. "Maybe it's time to try living instead." The great throne room had been transformed into something that belonged in a fairy tale. Massive crystal. Formations spiraled up toward the ceiling, while holographic earth auroras danced between them. Representatives from a dozen different species had come to witness this unprecedented union. Some curious, some hopeful, some clearly terrified of what it might mean for the galaxy. As the ceremony began, Dr. Park Minji monitored the bio-readings. From her position near the altar, the bonding hormones in both Hyun and Velnara had been building for days, but today the levels were unlike anything she'd ever recorded. "Something big is about to happen," she whispered to her research partner. "The chemical reactions are cascading through both their systems like a chain reaction." The traditional Thylorian chants echoed through the chamber, their haunting melodies making even the human guests feel the weight of 10,000 years of history. Then came the human elements, vows of love and partnership that Hyun's parents had taught him, words about growing together instead of staying the same. "I promise to bring chaos to your order," Hyun said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast room, "not to destroy it, but to help it grow." "I promise to bring structure to your chaos," Velnara replied, "not to cage it, but to help it soar." The moment their words met, everything changed. A wave of energy pulsed out from the altar, washing over every Thylorian in the room. Their rigid, formal postures began to relax. Their eyes, which had maintained the same colors for centuries, started shifting through new hues that had never existed before. Most shocking of all, they began to move differently, less like machines following programming, more like living beings discovering joy. "Impossible," gasped General Kexthar, who had been allowed to attend under heavy guard. The bonding ritual only affects the mated pair. But Dr. Park was frantically checking her scanners. Not this time. The human genetic markers are acting like a catalyst, triggering dormant evolutionary pathways in the entire Thylorian species. They're not just getting married, they're upgrading an entire civilization. Young Thylorians throughout the crowd were experiencing the most dramatic changes. Their movements became fluid and creative. They started making sounds that weren't part of any traditional ceremony. Laughter, gasps of wonder, even what sounded like singing. At the same time, Hyun felt his own scattered human thoughts organizing themselves in ways he'd never experienced. The constant mental chaos that had defined his species was finding patterns, structure, purpose. He wasn't losing his creativity. He was gaining the ability to focus it. "We're not just bonding with each other," Velnara whispered as they joined, all 6 of her hands with his 2. "We're bonding our species together." The final kiss sealed more than their marriage. It sealed the birth of something entirely new in the galaxy. 3 months after the wedding that changed everything, Hyun stood in the palace's new research wing, staring at something that shouldn't have been possible. In front of him, floating in a biosuspension chamber, was a tiny life form that was part human, part Thylorian, and completely unlike anything either species had ever produced. "The development rate is incredible, Dr. Park," Minji explained, her excitement barely contained as she pointed to the readings on her scanner. "Normal Thylorian gestation takes 18 months. Human pregnancy is 9 months. But this little one is growing at a rate that suggests they'll be ready in just 6 months, and with capabilities that exceed both parent species. The hybrid offspring, they'd decided to call it simply the child, until it could choose its own name, already showed signs of remarkable abilities. It had Velnara's 6-limbed structure, but with human-like flexibility. Its developing brain showed neural patterns that combined Thylorian precision with human creativity in ways that made the scientists' heads spin. "Look at this," Velnara said, approaching the chamber. The moment she got close, the child's tiny eyes opened, not the compound eyes of a Thylorian or the simple eyes of a human, but something entirely new that seemed to see in multiple dimensions at once. "It recognizes you both," Dr. Park observed in amazement. "At this stage of development, most offspring barely register their parents' presence, but this one is already forming complex emotional bonds. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a hybrid child. It was the first member of what might become an entirely new species, one that combined the best traits of both humans and Thylorians, while developing characteristics that neither had possessed alone. But the child wasn't the only miracle happening on Kithara. Ambassador Lee," Captain Yoon reported as he entered the research wing, "we have a situation. A good situation, but still a situation." "What kind of situation?" Hyun asked, though he suspected he already knew. "There's a line of Thylorians outside the embassy that stretches for 3 miles. They're all requesting permission to undergo bonding rituals with human volunteers." The news didn't surprise Hyun, but it did worry him. Ever since the wedding, young Thylorians had been approaching him and Velnara, asking about the bonding process. They'd seen how it had awakened new abilities in their queen and wanted the same transformation for themselves. "How many volunteers do we have?" Velnara asked. "That's the problem," Captain Yoon replied. "We have over 2,000 human volunteers from Earth who want to participate. Scientists, artists, engineers, even regular citizens who heard about the evolutionary breakthrough and want to be part of it." Dr. Park looked up from her scanners with concern. "We need to be careful. What happened between you two was unique. We don't fully understand the bonding process yet, and attempting it with incompatible pairs could be dangerous." But her research was revealing fascinating patterns. The bonding didn't work with just anyone. There had to be a specific genetic compatibility, a matching of personality types, and most importantly, genuine emotional connection between the pairs. "It's not just about mixing DNA," she explained to the gathered group. "The bonding requires both individuals to be willing to change, to become something new together. It's as much psychological as it is biological." The first successful secondary bonding happened 2 weeks later, between Dr. Kim Ji-won, the xenobiologist, and a young Thylorian artist named Sil Thane. Their connection had been building for months as they worked together studying human Thylorian interactions. The results were immediate and dramatic. Kim gained Silthane's ability to manipulate biomatter with her thoughts, while Silthane developed human-style creative intuition that revolutionized Thylorian art overnight. "It's working," Dr. Park announced after running tests on the new pair. "But each bonding is unique. Kim and Silthane developed different hybrid abilities than you and Velnara. It's like the process customizes itself based on what each pair needs to complement each other." More successful bondings followed. A human engineer paired with a Thylorian architect created living buildings that could adapt to their inhabitants' needs. A human musician bonded with a Thylorian healer, resulting in therapeutic music that could literally mend broken bones. "We're not just creating hybrid individuals," Hyun realized as he watched the latest bonded pair demonstrate their new abilities. "We're creating a new kind of civilization, one where the strengths of different species combine to solve problems that neither could handle alone." Velnara nodded, her hand resting protectively over their growing child. "Our offspring won't just be the bridge between our species, they'll be the foundation of something entirely new." The galaxy was about to get much more interesting. 6 months. After the first hybrid bondings, the communication array in the Thylorian palace never stopped buzzing. Messages poured in from every corner of the galaxy, some curious, some desperate, and some that made Hyun's head spin with their implications. "Another one just came in," announced Lieutenant Park Jinsu, the communications officer who'd been working overtime since news of the hybrid civilization spread. "The Crystalline Confederacy wants to open formal negotiations. That makes it 47 different species asking for meetings." Hyun sat in what used to be a traditional Thylorian council chamber, but now looked like something from a science fiction movie. Human technology blended seamlessly with Thylorian bioengineering, creating workstations that grew from the floor and screens that floated in mid-air. Velnara perched beside him, their now 5-month-old hybrid child sleeping peacefully in a biocradle that hummed gentle lullabies. "What do the crystalline beings want?" Velnara asked, her eyes shifting to curious blue. "Same thing everyone else wants," Jinsu replied, pulling up the message. "They want to know if bonding with humans could save their dying civilization. Apparently, they've been stuck in the same crystal formations for 10,000 years and can't adapt to climate changes on their homeworld." It was the same story everywhere. The galaxy was full of species that had reached evolutionary dead ends, civilizations so specialized or traditional that they couldn't change fast enough to survive in a rapidly shifting universe. Word had spread that humans possessed some kind of genetic flexibility that could unlock dormant potential in other species. "We're getting requests from the Aquatic Collective too," Hyun said, scrolling through his own messages. "They want to know if bonding could help them survive on land planets. And the Machine Syndicate thinks human creativity might help them develop true artificial consciousness." Dr. Park Minji burst into the chamber, her arms full of data tablets and her face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," she announced breathlessly. "The genetic analysis of our latest bonded pairs is showing patterns we never expected." Activated a holographic display that showed DNA structures in 3 dimensions. "Look at what happens when humans bond with different species. Each bonding unlocks different evolutionary pathways, but they're all connected somehow." The display showed human genetic markers acting like keys, unlocking specific traits in alien DNA that had been dormant for millennia. But more fascinating was what happened to the human partners. They developed new abilities that seemed custom-designed to complement their alien mates. "It's like human DNA is some kind of universal adapter," Dr. Park explained. "We can bond with almost any carbon-based life form and create hybrid traits that benefit both species. But we're also being changed by every bonding, becoming more than we were before." "That explains the flood of requests," Velnara said thoughtfully. "We're not just offering individual solutions, we're offering a path to evolutionary survival. For the entire galaxy." Captain Yoon entered the chamber looking overwhelmed. "Ambassador, we have a problem. 3 different species have sent fleets to our system. They're not being aggressive, but they're also not taking no for an answer." The vapor runners say their people will be extinct within 50 years if they don't get help soon. Hyun felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. What had started as an accidental marriage proposal had somehow made him and Velnara the most important diplomats in galactic history. "We can't bond with everyone," he said, thinking out loud. "There aren't enough humans, and we don't even know if some of these species are compatible with us." "But we can teach them," Velnara suggested. "Show them how bonding works. Help them. Understand the principles behind it. Maybe they can find ways to unlock their own evolutionary potential without needing human partners." Over the following weeks, they established the first Galactic Evolution Institute. Scientists and diplomats from dozens of species came to study the bonding process, not just to benefit their own people, but to understand how different civilizations could work together to survive. "We're not trying to make everyone part human," Hyun explained to a gathering of alien ambassadors. "We're trying to show that evolution doesn't have to be a lonely process. Species can grow stronger by connecting with others, sharing strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. The old model of galactic civilization, isolated species competing for resources, was dying. In its place, something unprecedented was emerging. A network of connected civilizations that shared knowledge, abilities, and evolutionary potential. "We're not just ambassadors anymore," Velnara told him that night as they watched their hybrid child take its first steps with all 6 limbs. "We're the architects of a new kind of galaxy." 2 years had transformed the galaxy in ways no one could have imagined. Hyun stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, a massive space habitat that existed somewhere between a space station and a living organism. The structure itself was a perfect example of what their new civilization had achieved, human engineering providing the framework, while Thylorian biotechnology made it grow and adapt like a living being. "Hard to believe it all started with me scratching my nose," he said to Captain Yoon, who had become his chief of security for the entire multi-species coalition. "Best nose scratch in galactic history," Yoon replied with a grin. "Though I still think you planned the whole thing." Through the transparent bio-walls, Hyun could see ships from 43 different species docked at the station. Crystalline vessels that looked like flying diamonds shared space with organic aquatic ships that seemed to swim through space, and sleek human fighters that could adapt their shape mid-flight thanks to hybrid technology. Their hybrid child, now 2 years old and already showing abilities that amazed everyone, came running into the observation deck on all 6 limbs. The child had inherited Velnara's grace and Hyun's curiosity, but also possessed something entirely new, the ability to communicate telepathically with any bonded pairs, making them a natural bridge between different species. "Mama says to come. Quickly," the child announced in a voice that somehow carried both human warmth and Thylorian precision. "The scary signals are getting stronger." The scary signals. For the past 6 months, deep space monitoring stations had been picking up transmissions from the galactic core, ancient, powerful, and definitely hostile. Dr. Park's analysis suggested they came from a machine intelligence that had been dormant for millions of years and was now awakening to find the galaxy very different from how it had left it. In the command center, Velnara was coordinating with representatives from dozens of species. Her 6 arms moved in perfect synchronization as she managed multiple communication streams, her hybrid abilities allowing her to process information at speeds that amazed even the most advanced artificial intelligences. "The probe signals are getting closer," announced Dr. Kim Ji-won, who now served as the coalition's chief science officer. Her bonding with the Thylorian artist Sil Thane had given her the ability to visualize complex data in 3-dimensional art forms that made patterns visible to everyone. Based on the transmission patterns, whatever's coming has technology that's millions of years ahead of anything we've ever seen. "How long do we have?" Hyun asked. 3 days, maybe 4 before. "The first scouts reach our outer systems." The ancient threat called itself the Convergence, a machine intelligence that had conquered thousands of galaxies before entering a long hibernation. Its message was simple and terrifying. All biological life was chaos that needed to be corrected. The galaxy would be converted into a perfect, orderly machine state, where nothing could change, grow, or evolve. In the old days, each species would try to fight this alone, Velnara said, her eyes cycling through worried colors. Most would fail, and those that survived would be too weak to resist the final assault. But we're not alone anymore, Hyun realized, looking around the command center, where beings who had been strangers just 2 years ago now worked together like parts of a single organism. And we're not the same species that we used to be. The battle plan they developed would have been impossible before the bonding program. Human strategic flexibility combined with Thylorian precision to create adaptive tactics. Crystalline defensive technology merged with aquatic flow dynamics to produce shields that could change their properties in real time. Machine syndicate. Computational power enhanced by human intuition generated battle scenarios that accounted for variables no pure AI could process. The Convergence expects to face separate, competing civilizations, Dr. Park explained as she outlined their strategy. Instead, it's going to encounter something that has never existed before, a truly unified galactic community where each species' strengths amplify the others. When the first Convergence scouts arrived, they found a galaxy ready for them. Not the chaotic collection of warring species they expected, but a coordinated defense network where every world was protected by technologies and strategies that combined the best of 43 different civilizations. The real shock came when the scouts tried to convert captured beings into machine components. The bonded pairs couldn't be converted. Their hybrid nature created feedback loops that confused the Convergence's programming. Even more surprising, the bonded pairs could actually reverse the conversion process, freeing beings that the machines had already claimed. We're not just immune to their conversion technology, Hyun announced to the Coalition fleet as they prepared for the final battle. We're the cure. Every person they've ever converted can be brought back through the bonding process. The war that followed lasted only 6 months, but it changed everything. The Convergence, designed to fight against chaos, couldn't adapt to an enemy that combined perfect organization with limitless creativity. More importantly, they couldn't understand an enemy that won by making friends instead of conquering them. Standing in the same observation deck where it all began, Hyun watched as former Convergence drones worked alongside Coalition members to rebuild the worlds that had been damaged in the fighting. The galaxy wasn't just safe, it was more alive than it had ever been. So what's next? Velnara asked, joining him at the window. Whatever comes, Hyun replied, taking her hand. We'll face it together.